Sometimes the deepest heartbreak begins with a conversation that was never meant to be heard. Emily Carter balanced a silver serving tray with 2 porcelain coffee cups as she walked through the quiet halls of the Romano estate. Early morning sunlight streamed through the towering windows, casting long golden reflections across polished marble floors while the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee drifted gently through the air. The mansion had already come alive with its usual rhythm. Housekeepers moved quietly between rooms. Gardeners trimmed the hedges outside the grand entrance. The chef carefully arranged breakfast in the kitchen. Every person Emily passed greeted her with genuine warmth because she never treated anyone as though their position determined their worth. She remembered birthdays, asked about families, and thanked every employee by name. To the people who worked inside the estate, she was not simply the wife of Vincent Romano. She was the reason the mansion felt like a home. That morning, Vincent had requested coffee before meeting several trusted associates inside his private conference room. Emily had prepared everything herself, adding warm croissants because she knew he often became so focused on work that he forgot to eat. She approached the heavy oak doors with a quiet smile, ready to knock. Before her hand reached the polished wood, laughter drifted through the slightly opened doorway. She immediately recognized Vincent's calm, confident voice. One of the men inside asked, "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been if you had never married?" Vincent answered without hesitation. Marriage solved certain problems. Love was never the reason. A few low chuckles filled the room. Emily froze where she stood. Another associate spoke with curious amusement. "Your wife still seems completely devoted to you." Vincent gave a quiet laugh that carried no cruelty, only complete certainty. Emily believes every broken thing can be repaired if someone loves enough. She still fights for this marriage because she thinks loyalty changes people. She has never understood that my world does not reward kindness. Another voice followed. Then why keep pretending everything is perfect? Vincent replied in the same steady tone he used during business negotiations. Because she keeps this house peaceful. Everyone trusts her. Everyone listens to her. That is useful. But she has never truly been my equal. She is far too gentle to stand beside someone like me. The words settled over Emily like winter air. She tightened her fingers around the serving tray, forcing herself to remain perfectly still. Her heart ached, yet her face never changed. She had endured lonely evenings, cancelled anniversaries, endless business trips, and countless silent dinners because she believed love required patience. Never once had she imagined that the man she had spent years supporting quietly believed she belonged only in the background of his life. She slowly stepped backward without making the slightest sound. Inside the room, the conversation continued as though nothing important had been said. No one knew she had heard every word. Emily carried the untouched coffee back through the silent hallway with the same graceful posture she had entered with only minutes earlier. When the head housekeeper noticed the full tray and asked whether the meeting had ended, Emily smiled gently. "They are still talking. I will keep the coffee warm a little longer." Her voice remained calm, giving away nothing. Only after she reached the privacy of the kitchen did she place the tray upon the counter and close her eyes for a brief moment. A single slow breath steadied the emotions threatening to surface. Then she quietly adjusted her apron, thanked the chef for preparing breakfast, and began arranging plates for the household exactly as she did every morning. Every employee who entered the kitchen received the same warm smile, the same kind greeting, and the same thoughtful attention she had always offered. No one could see the silent crack that had formed inside her heart. As the morning continued, Emily made one quiet decision that would change the course of her life. She would not argue. She would not beg to be understood. She would not allow pain to turn kindness into bitterness. If her marriage survived, it would no longer be because she chased someone who refused to see her worth. From that day forward, she would continue to love with dignity, but she would never again measure her value by the opinion of the man who had unknowingly revealed the truth hidden behind a half-open door. The following morning arrived with the same quiet beauty that had greeted the Romano estate every day for years. Warm sunlight stretched across the gardens, birds settled among the tall oak trees, and the comforting aroma of fresh bread drifted from the kitchen long before anyone else had awakened. To every person living and working inside the mansion, it looked like an ordinary day. Only Emily Carter knew that the woman who had gone to sleep the night before was not the same one who quietly stepped into the kitchen before sunrise. She still greeted every employee with the same gentle smile. She still thanked the chef for arriving early and complimented the housekeepers on the fresh flowers decorating the dining room. Nothing about her manners had changed. What had changed was something no one else could see. She had stopped hoping that one more act of devotion would finally make Vincent Romano understand how deeply she loved him. Instead, she decided that kindness would remain part of her character, but no longer become the price she paid for acceptance. When Vincent entered the dining room dressed for another busy morning, he found breakfast waiting exactly as it always had. Fresh fruit, warm eggs, toasted bread, and perfectly brewed coffee rested neatly on the table beside the newspaper he preferred to read before leaving for work. Emily looked up from arranging a small vase of white lilies and smiled warmly. "Good morning. I hope today goes well for you." Vincent nodded while reviewing the documents already filling his attention. "Thank you. I have meetings most of the day." Emily simply answered, "Then I will make sure dinner is ready whenever you return." The exchange lasted less than 30 seconds, yet something about it felt different. There was no disappointment in her voice when he barely looked up. There was no silent hope that he might linger for another conversation. She had quietly accepted that affection could not be forced into existence. After Vincent left, the younger housekeeper approached Emily carrying a basket of clean linens. "Mrs. Carter, you look tired today. Did you sleep well?" Emily smiled reassuringly before helping fold several towels. "Everyone has difficult nights sometimes. Tomorrow usually feels a little brighter." The young woman smiled with relief, comforted by words that Emily herself desperately needed to hear. Throughout the afternoon, Emily moved through the estate exactly as she always had. She helped the elderly gardener cover delicate flowers before an unexpected frost. She reminded the chauffeur to call his son after an important school interview because she remembered the date without anyone mentioning it again. She quietly prepared homemade soup for one of the kitchen assistants who had caught a cold but insisted on finishing the workday. None of those acts were performed because someone was watching. They simply reflected the woman she had always chosen to be. Late that evening, Vincent returned home earlier than expected. As he crossed the entrance hall, he paused without understanding why. Every employee who passed Emily greeted her with genuine warmth rather than formal obligation. The security guard smiled naturally when she thanked him for standing outside during the cold weather. The housekeepers laughed softly as she complimented the decorations they had arranged together. Even the oldest groundskeeper removed his cap with sincere respect when she wished him a safe drive home. Vincent quietly observed each interaction. People obeyed him because of his authority. They cared about Emily because of the way she made them feel. The realization unsettled him more than he expected. Upstairs, Emily stood beside the bedroom window watching the last rays of sunlight disappear beyond the estate gardens. She remembered every word she had overheard outside the conference room, yet she felt no desire to confront Vincent or prove him wrong. She whispered softly to herself, "I cannot choose how someone values me, but I can choose never to forget my own worth." With that quiet promise resting in her heart, she closed the curtains, turned off the bedroom light, and prepared for another day, unaware that the smallest change inside her would soon become impossible for the man who had failed to notice her true strength for so many years to ignore. Several quiet days passed, and life inside the Romano estate continued with the same polished routine that had existed for years. Expensive cars arrived through the front gates every morning. Business associates filled the conference rooms with conversations about contracts and investments. Staff members carried out their responsibilities with quiet precision. On the surface, nothing had changed. Yet beneath that carefully ordered routine, the emotional center of the mansion quietly continued beating through one person. Emily Carter never announced her presence. She simply noticed what everyone else overlooked. One rainy afternoon, the longtime chauffeur, Daniel Brooks, entered through the service entrance carrying an expression he could not quite hide. His usual smile was missing, and although he greeted everyone politely, his shoulders seemed unusually heavy. Emily recognized the difference immediately. As she poured him a fresh cup of coffee, she asked gently, "Is everything all right at home?" Daniel hesitated before admitting that his teenage daughter had become anxious about her first college interview and no longer believed she was good enough to earn admission. Emily listened without interrupting. After a thoughtful pause, she smiled warmly. "Please tell her that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing to walk through the door even while your hands are shaking." Then she quietly slipped a handwritten note into an envelope and asked Daniel to give it to his daughter before the interview. The note contained nothing more than a few encouraging sentences and a reminder that one difficult day could never define an entire future. Daniel thanked her with grateful eyes before leaving. 3 days later, he returned carrying homemade cookies that his daughter had baked herself after receiving an acceptance letter. "She said your words helped her believe in herself again," he said softly. Emily accepted only one cookie and insisted the rest be shared with the kitchen staff. Later that same week, the estate accountant arrived looking unusually distracted. He apologized repeatedly after discovering a scheduling mistake that delayed several routine payments. Before anyone else could react, Emily calmly reassured him that honest mistakes deserved careful solutions rather than unnecessary embarrassment. She spent nearly an hour helping reorganize paperwork until everything was corrected. When the accountant thanked her, she simply smiled and replied, "Everyone deserves the chance to leave work feeling respected." None of those moments reached Vincent Romano's attention directly, yet their effects quietly surrounded him every single day. Employees worked with greater confidence because they knew Emily would treat them fairly. New staff members adapted more quickly because she welcomed them personally instead of allowing them to feel like strangers. Even visiting business partners often commented that the Romano estate felt unusually peaceful despite the demanding responsibilities carried within its walls. One afternoon, Vincent happened to pass through the main hallway as two senior advisors prepared to leave after a long meeting. They noticed Emily arranging fresh flowers near the staircase and immediately stopped to greet her. One advisor thanked her for recommending a specialist who had helped his elderly mother recover after surgery. The other smiled while mentioning that his grandson still talked about the storybook Emily had mailed after learning he loved reading about explorers. Vincent slowed his pace without meaning to. Neither conversation involved business. Neither person owed Emily anything. Their gratitude came from genuine appreciation rather than obligation. That evening, while reviewing reports inside his office, Vincent noticed a small wooden basket resting on one corner of his desk. Inside were several handwritten thank you cards addressed to Emily from current and former employees who had moved away over the years. Someone had mistakenly placed the basket among documents scheduled for storage. Curious, Vincent opened the first card. It thanked Emily for sitting beside a frightened employee throughout the night after learning his wife had become seriously ill. Another thanked her for quietly paying for a child's school supplies without allowing anyone to discover who had helped. Another simply read, "Thank you for reminding me that kindness still exists." Vincent slowly read every letter in complete silence. The woman he believed was too gentle for his world had quietly become the reason so many people continued believing there was goodness inside it, and for the first time in many years, he began to wonder whether the strongest foundation of everything he had built had never been his authority at all, but the quiet compassion he had been taking for granted every single day. As autumn slowly settled over the Romano estate, Vincent Romano found himself noticing details that had somehow escaped him for years. They were not dramatic moments that demanded attention. They were quiet moments that most people would have forgotten within minutes. Yet once he began seeing them, they seemed impossible to ignore. One crisp morning, while walking toward his office, Vincent passed the sunroom and noticed Emily Carter sitting beside Margaret, the elderly housekeeper who had served the Romano family for more than 3 decades. Margaret held an old photograph with trembling hands as she spoke softly about her late husband, whose birthday would have been that day. Emily never interrupted. She simply listened with complete attention, gently holding the older woman's hand until tears slowly became a peaceful smile. Vincent remained in the hallway for several silent seconds before continuing toward his meeting. As he walked away, one uncomfortable thought entered his mind. He could not remember the last time he had asked Margaret how she was feeling. Later that afternoon, a young groundskeeper accidentally damaged one of the expensive stone planters decorating the front entrance. The young man stood frozen with embarrassment, convinced he would lose his position. Before anyone else reacted, Emily calmly walked across the garden, examined the cracked planter, and smiled gently. "Flowers have always grown back stronger than stone," she said softly. Then she knelt beside him and helped gather the scattered soil with her own hands. The tension immediately disappeared. The young groundskeeper laughed nervously, several other employees joined them, and within minutes everyone was working together as though nothing unfortunate had happened. From his office window, Vincent quietly watched the entire scene. He realized that Emily had solved the problem without making anyone feel ashamed. That evening, one of Vincent's oldest business partners arrived for a private dinner. During the meal, the guest accidentally mentioned that his teenage grandson had regained confidence after receiving several handwritten letters of encouragement from Emily while recovering from a difficult illness. Vincent looked toward his wife with quiet surprise. Emily simply smiled and gently changed the subject, making no attempt to receive praise. After dinner, the guest paused beside Vincent before leaving. "You know, money can build remarkable houses, but very few people know how to build a place where everyone feels welcome. Your wife has accomplished something that many successful people spend their entire lives trying to understand." Those words stayed with Vincent long after the front door closed. Over the following week, he found himself paying closer attention whenever Emily interacted with the people around her. She thanked delivery drivers by name. She remembered which gardener preferred coffee without sugar. She quietly placed fresh flowers inside the security office because she noticed the room had no windows. She even wrote a handwritten congratulations card to the daughter of one of the housekeepers after learning she had earned a college scholarship. None of those thoughtful gestures appeared on any schedule. No one instructed her to do them. They simply reflected the kind of person she chose to be every single day. One evening, Vincent returned home after another demanding meeting and found the library unusually quiet. As he walked inside, he noticed Emily carefully placing several old family photo albums back onto the shelves after helping his mother organize them earlier that afternoon. She smiled warmly at the elderly woman before gently kissing her forehead and wishing her a peaceful night. Vincent watched from the doorway without saying a word. His mother looked happier than he had seen her in months. When Emily quietly left the room, his mother noticed him standing there and smiled knowingly. "Your father always believed a family becomes stronger because of the person who brings everyone together, not because of the person who gives the orders." Vincent remained silent as he looked toward the hallway where Emily had disappeared only moments earlier. For the first time, he no longer saw only the gentle woman he believed needed protecting from his world. He began to see the quiet strength that had been holding that world together while he had been too busy measuring greatness by power to recognize the extraordinary value of simple compassion. Several days passed after Vincent Romano's quiet observations, and the atmosphere inside the estate continued to change in ways that were almost impossible to describe. Nothing dramatic happened. There were no loud arguments, no emotional confrontations, and no sudden decisions. Instead, there was an almost invisible distance that had settled between Vincent and Emily Carter. It was not created by anger. It had been created by acceptance. Emily still prepared breakfast every morning, remembered every appointment on the household calendar, greeted every employee with sincere kindness, and made certain the mansion remained a place where everyone felt respected. The only difference was that she had quietly stopped waiting for Vincent to notice. She no longer searched his face for approval after a thoughtful gesture. She no longer lingered beside the front windows when he returned late at night. She had stopped expecting recognition for the love she continued to give so freely. One evening, Vincent arrived home earlier than usual after several meetings had ended unexpectedly. As he entered the dining room, he found dinner already waiting beneath the warm glow of candlelight. Emily had prepared his favorite meal, arranged fresh white flowers in the center of the table, and left a small handwritten card beside his place setting reminding him that an important medical appointment for his mother had been confirmed the following morning. When Emily entered carrying a bowl of warm soup, she smiled politely. "I thought you might appreciate a quiet dinner tonight." Vincent looked at the table before meeting her eyes. "You remembered everything again?" Emily nodded gently. "I always keep the family calendar updated." They sat together in unusual silence. The room felt peaceful, yet something important was missing. For years, Emily had quietly filled every silence with gentle conversation, hopeful questions, or thoughtful stories about the people living inside the estate. Tonight she simply enjoyed the meal without trying to bridge the emotional distance between them. Halfway through dinner, Vincent finally spoke. "You have changed." Emily looked at him calmly. "Perhaps. You seem quieter than before." She rested her fork beside her plate and answered with complete honesty. "I simply realized that not every feeling has to be explained in order to be real." Vincent remained silent for a moment. "Have I done something that hurt you?" Emily did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked toward the candlelight flickering gently across the polished table. Then she spoke so softly that every word carried even greater weight. "There was a time when I believed if I loved someone deeply enough, they would eventually see my heart. Now I understand that people only recognize what they are willing to notice." Vincent felt an unfamiliar heaviness settle inside his chest. Emily continued without anger or accusation. "I have never regretted loving you. I have only realized that love cannot continue asking one person to carry the entire weight of a marriage." The words settled quietly between them. There were no raised voices. No tears. No dramatic farewell. Only truth spoken with dignity. Emily slowly gathered the empty dishes before pausing beside the doorway. "I will always choose kindness, Vincent. But I will never again confuse kindness with abandoning my own worth." She left the dining room with the same calm grace she carried into every part of her life. Vincent remained seated long after the candles had begun to burn low. For years he had believed Emily would always keep reaching for him no matter how distant he became. It had never crossed his mind that the strongest woman he had ever known might one day stop chasing his understanding, not because she loved him less, but because she had finally learned that genuine love should never require someone to lose themselves in order to preserve another person's comfort. The conversation from that quiet dinner refused to leave Vincent Romano's thoughts. Every word Emily Carter had spoken echoed through his mind, not because she had spoken with anger, but because she had spoken with complete peace. For the first time since their marriage began, she had stopped asking him to understand her. She had simply told the truth and entrusted him with whatever choice he made afterward. The following morning, Vincent left the estate before sunrise, hoping another demanding schedule would push those uncomfortable thoughts aside. Instead, they followed him through every meeting. Financial reports blurred together. Business discussions that once held his complete attention suddenly felt strangely distant. The sentence Emily had spoken continued returning with quiet persistence. Love cannot continue asking one person to carry the entire weight of a marriage. After the final meeting of the afternoon, most of Vincent's advisors gathered their documents and prepared to leave. Only Michael Donovan remained behind. Michael had served the Romano family for more than 30 years. He had advised Vincent's father long before Vincent ever assumed responsibility for the family business. As the conference room slowly emptied, Vincent finally spoke. "Michael, how long have you known Emily?" The older man looked at him with gentle surprise before answering. "Since the morning she first entered this house as your wife." Vincent hesitated for several moments. "Has she always been the person everyone trusts?" Michael smiled faintly. "I assumed you already knew that." Vincent quietly lowered his eyes. "Perhaps I never truly looked." Michael slowly returned to his chair. "Then perhaps your father was right to ask me to keep something until the day you were finally ready to understand it." From his leather briefcase, he carefully removed a sealed envelope that had become slightly worn with age. "Your father gave this to me during the final months of his life. He told me not to place it in your hands until I believed you could read it with an open heart." Vincent accepted the envelope with unexpected hesitation. Inside rested a single handwritten letter. The familiar handwriting immediately brought back memories he had not visited in years. "My son, if you are reading these words, then I hope time has taught you something that experience could not teach me soon enough. A family is never held together by the strongest voice inside the room. It is held together by the person who makes everyone else feel safe enough to speak. You will spend your life learning how to earn respect through leadership. Do not overlook the woman beside you, because she already understands how to earn it through kindness. If you are wise, you will learn from her while you still have the opportunity." Vincent remained motionless as he finished reading. Michael waited quietly before speaking again. "There is more you should know. During your father's illness, you believed your responsibility was protecting the business. Emily believed her responsibility was protecting the people carrying that burden with you. Every evening after you left the hospital, she remained behind. She prepared meals for exhausted nurses, comforted your mother when she believed no one was watching, wrote personal notes to every doctor involved in your father's care, and quietly thanked every employee who stayed beyond their normal hours. She never told you because she believed kindness loses something precious the moment it begins searching for recognition." Vincent closed his eyes briefly, overcome by a realization that arrived years too late. Michael stood and gently rested one hand upon the conference table. "Everyone inside the Romano estate has always respected your authority, Vincent. They love Emily because she never allowed your name, your influence, or your wealth to change the way she treated another human being. That is why this house has always remained a home." After Michael quietly left the room, Vincent remained alone with the letter resting in his hands. For the first time in many years, he understood that the greatest strength inside his world had never been the empire he inherited. It had been the quiet woman who had carried its heart every single day while asking for nothing except the chance to be truly seen. The letter remained inside Vincent Romano's jacket pocket for several days. He carried it everywhere without mentioning it to anyone, reading it whenever a rare moment of silence appeared between meetings. Each time he unfolded the worn paper, his father's words seemed to reveal a meaning he had never been ready to understand before. He had spent years believing leadership meant speaking first, deciding quickly, and never allowing uncertainty to appear. Yet the woman he had quietly underestimated possessed a different kind of strength, one that never demanded attention because it had never depended upon it. Vincent made one decision without telling anyone. He would stop judging Emily Carter by the image he had created in his own mind and begin watching the woman she truly was. The following morning, he remained home longer than usual before leaving for work. From the upstairs hallway, he noticed Emily helping the youngest housekeeper learn how to arrange fresh flowers in the front entrance. She never criticized a mistake. Instead, she gently demonstrated each step before encouraging the nervous young woman to try again herself. When the arrangement was finally finished, Emily smiled with genuine pride as though she had accomplished something far greater than placing flowers into a crystal vase. The young employee walked away smiling with quiet confidence. Vincent realized that Emily had not only completed a simple task. She had helped someone believe in themselves. Later that afternoon, Vincent returned unexpectedly after one of his appointments had been cancelled. As he entered the estate, he heard soft laughter coming from the library. Curious, he paused outside the open doorway. Emily sat beside his elderly mother, reading aloud from one of her favorite novels while several members of the household staff quietly listened during their afternoon break. Every few pages, Emily stopped to ask his mother whether she remembered a particular passage from years earlier. The older woman's face glowed with happiness. Vincent could not remember the last time he had seen his mother laugh so freely. No expensive gift could have created that moment. It existed because Emily had offered something far more valuable than money. She had given someone her complete attention. Over the next several days, Vincent continued noticing similar moments. Emily personally thanked delivery drivers before they returned to their trucks. She remembered the names of employees' children and asked about school events she had quietly written into her calendar weeks earlier. When the estate electrician mentioned that his wife had recently started a small bakery, Emily ordered pastries from her instead of using a large catering company for an upcoming family gathering. She never announced those thoughtful choices. She simply made them because helping people had become part of who she was. One evening, Vincent entered the kitchen after everyone else had finished dinner. Emily stood alone preparing small care packages filled with homemade soup, fresh bread, and fruit. He looked at the neatly labeled baskets with quiet curiosity. "Are we expecting guests tomorrow?" Emily smiled gently while tying another ribbon. "No. Margaret told me that 2 former employees have been caring for sick family members. I thought a warm meal might make tomorrow a little easier for them." Vincent stared at the baskets for several silent moments. Those employees had retired years earlier. They no longer worked for the Romano family. Emily had no obligation to continue caring for them. Yet she never seemed to calculate whether kindness was deserved or required. She simply offered it. As she carried the finished baskets toward the pantry, Vincent spoke almost without thinking. "Thank you." Emily paused and turned toward him with mild surprise. "For what?" Vincent searched for an answer that felt large enough to express what he had begun to understand, but no words seemed sufficient. Finally he answered honestly. "For reminding this house what kindness looks like." Emily smiled politely, believing he was simply being courteous, then quietly continued her work. Vincent watched her disappear through the hallway, realizing she still had no idea that every quiet act of compassion was slowly dismantling the pride he had mistaken for strength, and for the first time in his life, becoming a better husband seemed far more important than being seen as a powerful man. The annual appreciation evening arrived beneath a clear autumn sky, and the Romano estate welcomed employees, longtime advisors, business partners, and their families into the grand ballroom that had witnessed countless celebrations through the years. Crystal chandeliers reflected warm light across polished floors while a string quartet filled the room with gentle music. Vincent Romano had attended this gathering every year since assuming responsibility for the family, yet everyone expected the evening to unfold exactly as it always had. He would deliver a formal speech, thank everyone for another successful year, and quietly return to work before the celebration had fully ended. Emily Carter greeted every guest with the same warmth she had shown since the first day she entered the estate. She remembered children's names, embraced retired employees who had returned to visit, and introduced new staff members to those who had served the family for decades. Wherever she walked, conversations became lighter, laughter came more naturally, and strangers somehow felt like old friends. Vincent watched everything from across the room. This time he was not observing as a businessman measuring efficiency. He was watching as a husband finally learning where the true heart of his home had always been. When the master of ceremonies invited Vincent to address the guests, the ballroom gradually fell silent. He stepped onto the stage carrying a prepared speech inside a leather folder. For several seconds he looked across the faces gathered before him. Then, without warning, he quietly closed the folder and placed it upon the podium. Every person in the room sensed that something unexpected was about to happen. Vincent took a slow breath before speaking. "Tonight I intended to thank all of you for another successful year. Instead, I need to thank one person for teaching me something I should have learned long ago. His eyes found Emily standing near the middle of the ballroom beside several members of the household staff. She looked at him with quiet surprise, completely unaware of what he intended to say. Vincent continued with complete honesty. For many years I believed leadership was measured by authority, influence, and the ability to make difficult decisions. I was wrong. The strongest person in this family has never been the one standing on this stage. A gentle silence settled across the room. Vincent slowly stepped down from the platform and walked toward Emily until only a few feet separated them. I spent years overlooking the person who carried this home with kindness while I measured success by power. I accepted your patience without appreciating its cost. I accepted your loyalty without recognizing the sacrifices behind it. I spoke carelessly when I should have spoken with gratitude. Emily lowered her eyes for a moment, her expression calm but deeply moved. Vincent continued, his voice steady despite the emotion filling every word. I cannot change the moments when I failed you. I cannot erase the pain created by my own pride. But I can stand before everyone who matters to us and say what should have been said long ago. Emily, I am deeply sorry. You deserve to be valued, respected, and truly seen every single day. Instead, you carried this marriage with more grace than I deserved. I promise that from this day forward my actions will speak louder than the mistakes of my past. Tears quietly appeared in the eyes of several longtime employees. Michael Donovan smiled gently while Vincent's mother wiped away tears of her own. Emily looked into Vincent's eyes for a long, thoughtful moment before answering with the same quiet dignity that had always defined her. A sincere apology is the beginning of change, not the end of it. If your heart truly has changed, then time will gently prove what words alone never can. Vincent nodded without hesitation. Then I will allow time to become my witness. Around them, applause slowly filled the ballroom, not because a powerful man had delivered a remarkable speech, but because everyone present had just witnessed something far rarer than authority. They had witnessed humility freely chosen, accountability honestly accepted, and a husband finally honoring the extraordinary woman whose quiet strength had always been the greatest foundation of the Romano family. 1 year passed, not through dramatic promises or impossible perfection, but through hundreds of quiet decisions that slowly transformed the Romano estate into a place where respect became as natural as breathing. Every sunrise brought another opportunity for Vincent Romano to prove that the words he had spoken on the night of his public apology were not simply a beautiful speech. He greeted every employee by name before beginning his workday. He listened before giving instructions. He thanked people whose efforts had once gone unnoticed. Most importantly, he no longer measured strength by the ability to command a room. He measured it by the ability to leave every person feeling valued after the conversation ended. Emily Carter never asked whether he had changed. She simply watched his actions unfold day after day. Trust, she believed, returned quietly, just as it had quietly disappeared. Each thoughtful choice Vincent made became another small stone laid beneath the foundation of a stronger marriage. They began sharing breakfast without business reports covering the table. Evening walks through the estate gardens slowly replaced silent dinners interrupted by telephone calls. Sometimes they spoke for an hour. Sometimes they simply enjoyed the peaceful silence beside one another, discovering that comfort did not always require conversation. One bright spring afternoon, Emily knelt beside the front garden planting new white roses where harsh winter winds had destroyed the previous flowers. Vincent joined her without being asked, carefully placing another young rose into the freshly prepared soil. He smiled as he brushed the dirt from his hands. I remember planting flowers here years ago. None of them survived the winter. Emily looked at the new blossoms before answering gently. They were never the wrong flowers. They simply needed stronger roots. Vincent understood immediately that she was speaking about far more than a garden. Several months later, the annual appreciation gathering returned once again. Employees, advisors, retired staff members, and their families filled the ballroom with laughter that seemed warmer than ever before. This time, however, people noticed something different before the evening had even begun. Vincent and Emily welcomed every guest together. They stood side by side near the entrance, thanking each person for coming, asking about children, celebrating new grandchildren, and remembering important milestones from the previous year. No one saw a powerful husband standing in front while his wife quietly followed behind. They saw two partners walking beside one another with equal respect and genuine affection. Near one of the tall windows, Michael Donovan watched the evening unfold beside Vincent's mother. She smiled softly and whispered, "Your husband would have been proud to see this." Michael nodded with quiet certainty. He always believed Vincent possessed the ability to become a remarkable leader. He simply needed the right teacher. She looked toward Emily, who was laughing with several longtime employees. Perhaps he found that teacher much earlier than any of us realized. As the celebration came to a peaceful close, Vincent and Emily stepped outside onto the front terrace overlooking the gardens. The evening air carried the gentle fragrance of blooming roses while warm lights glowed across the estate behind them. Vincent reached for Emily's hand with quiet confidence, no longer afraid that kindness somehow diminished his strength. "Thank you," he said softly. "Not because you stayed beside me. Thank you because you never allowed my failures to convince you to become someone you were never meant to be." Emily smiled with peaceful warmth as she looked across the moonlit gardens. Real love does not ask us to lose ourselves. It asks us to become better together. Vincent gently squeezed her hand, knowing those simple words had become the greatest lesson of his life. In the years that followed, people continued to admire Vincent Romano because of the influence he carried, but those who truly knew the story remembered something far more meaningful. The strongest person inside the Romano family had never been the one with the loudest voice or the greatest authority. It had always been the woman whose quiet dignity transformed pride into humility, distance into understanding, and a struggling marriage into a lasting home built upon respect, gratitude, compassion, and love that neither hardship nor time could ever diminish.